I've always prided myself on having control over my business, my life, and most of all, my marriage. At 40, I had reached a place that many only dream of, a successful entrepreneur, married to a beautiful woman, Mia, who shared in my victories and stood by me when things got tough. When I landed a contract that would secure my business for years to come, I thought it was the perfect reason to take a break, celebrate, and maybe reset for a while. Mia and I booked a villa in the mountains, far from the noise of the city. We thought we'd unwind, drink wine, enjoy the serenity, and get some much-needed time together. The first evening was idyllic, dinner by candlelight, the sound of crickets, the mountain air. But as the night stretched on, something was nagging at me, a discomfort I couldn't quite shake. After dinner, Mia went to bed early. I figured I'd take a swim in the moonlit pool, just a way to relax, cool off, and clear my head after all the stress of the contract. The pool was beautiful, the water shimmering under the full moon. I dove in, letting the cool water envelop me, sinking beneath the surface to push away the weight of everything. But then, as I came up for air, I saw it. A shadow on the water. I stopped mid-breath, my pulse skipping. It wasn't mine. It was too large, too distinct. It hovered just beneath the surface, moving ever so slightly with the ripples. My heart started pounding in my chest, and I immediately pulled myself out of the water, my eyes scanning the dark edges of the pool area. There was no one there. Nothing. The air felt colder now, a sharpness I couldn't explain. I circled the pool, checked the corners, but found nothing. No sign of anyone. No footprints. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. Was I just exhausted? Was it a trick of the light, a play of shadows in the water? I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just fatigue. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But that shadow, it felt real. My pulse was still racing as I walked back to the villa. The house seemed quieter now, more still. I climbed into bed next to Mia, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept thinking about that shadow. It was impossible to ignore, gnawing at my thoughts. It felt wrong, like something was waiting for me, something I couldn't see but could feel just on the edge of my awareness. The next morning, I woke up with the same unsettling feeling. The sunlight streamed in through the curtains, but the warmth didn't reach me. I tried to focus on breakfast, on being present with Mia, but my mind kept returning to the pool. Had I imagined it? Could I have misinterpreted what I saw? There was something inside me that refused to let it go. The feeling lingered, sharp and disorienting, but I didn't tell Mia. What would I say? Hey, I saw a shadow in the pool last night, but I'm probably just tired, so don't worry about it? I didn't want to make her nervous. Instead, I tried to bury the feeling, but the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it became, creeping into my every thought. As the day wore on, I decided to take a walk around the villa to clear my head. I needed some space to think, to separate myself from the haze that was settling over me. The villa was isolated, tucked away in the mountains, surrounded by dense woods. I wandered along a dirt path, the quiet of nature wrapping around me, but it did little to calm my nerves. It wasn't just the shadow. It was everything, the nagging feeling that something was off, the sense of being watched. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just in my head. The air seemed to hum with a strange energy that I couldn't explain, and I couldn't shake the thought that maybe Mia wasn't telling me everything. As I walked, I found myself drawn toward a small clearing. There, standing near the edge of the woods, was a man I'd never seen before. His appearance caught me off guard. He was in his late 30s, dressed in a suit that looked a little too sharp for someone living this far from the city. There was something unsettling about him. His eyes were too knowing, too deliberate, as if he could read me in a way I couldn't understand. I didn't know why, but as soon as he saw me, he walked right up to me as if he'd been waiting for me. He didn't introduce himself, but he knew exactly who I was. His words were strange, cryptic, like he was speaking in riddles. I can tell a lot about a person by what they bury, he said, his voice low, almost conversational. We all bury things, you know. Things we want to keep hidden. It's not just about what's in the ground, it's about what's in the heart. I stood there, unsure of what to make of him. He continued, his eyes narrowing as if he was waiting for me to catch on. Your wife? She's buried a lot, hasn't she? I froze, my blood running cold. How could he know about Mia? I barely even mentioned her to anyone, let alone to a stranger in the woods. He smiled, sensing my unease, and without another word, walked off into the trees, leaving me standing there, unsettled and confused. This man, this strange encounter, it didn't sit right with me. I turned and walked back to the villa, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. What did he mean about Mia? What was he trying to tell me? And why did I feel like my life was slipping out of my control, piece by piece? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it all. The shadow in the pool, the stranger in the woods, and Mia. Something was wrong, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. But I knew I had to. The morning after the strange encounter in the woods, I woke up still feeling the weight of the previous night. The sun was out, casting its light across the room, but everything felt muted, like I was living in a fog. Mia was still asleep beside me, her soft breathing filling the quiet of the room. I watched her for a moment, wondering if she had any idea what was happening in my mind. I wanted to believe that she was innocent, that everything was fine, but the nagging feeling in the back of my head refused to go away. It wasn't just the shadow in the pool anymore. It wasn't even the stranger I met in the woods. It was something about Mia herself that felt distant. Like there was something she wasn't telling me, something I wasn't supposed to know. I tried to push the thoughts aside as I went through the motions of the day. We had breakfast together, and Mia was as charming and relaxed as always. She didn't seem to notice the change in my demeanor, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen and heard. The man in the woods had been too specific, too pointed with his words. Your wife, she's buried a lot. How could he know that? I tried to shake it off, but it stuck with me, like a splinter lodged deep under my skin. My mind kept circling back to the things that didn't add up. Why had he mentioned Mia? How did he know anything about her past? And what was buried, literally or figuratively, that I hadn't been told? I couldn't stop myself. I started looking around the villa, checking the rooms, searching for something that might explain the strange feeling gnawing at me. The villa was beautiful, isolated, but it felt like a maze of secrets. I wandered through the rooms, hoping that if I just poked around long enough, I might uncover something. The light from the windows cast shadows across the furniture, and the stillness of the place only heightened the sense of something being wrong. Eventually, I found an old notebook tucked away on a shelf in the bedroom. It was small, leather-bound, and looked like it had been there for years, perhaps even longer than the villa had been in our possession. I opened it, hoping it was just a collection of travel notes or to-do lists, something mundane that would ease my mind. But when I flipped through the pages, I realized it was much more than that. It was Mia's old journal. The entries were intimate, personal, things that I had never known about her. It was like reading the thoughts of a different person, someone I had never met. In one of the entries, she wrote about her past before we met. I had known that Mia had lived a life before me, but I had never asked too many questions. There were vague mentions of relationships, of difficulties, but nothing specific enough to make me worry. But now, reading these words, a part of me wished I had never looked. She wrote about things I had never even imagined, the people she had known, the places she had been, and the decisions she had made that had led her to become who she was. There were hints of things she had buried, things that were clearly not part of the life she had built with me. The entries weren't just about old lovers or vague memories. They were about events, specific moments that hinted at something darker, something more dangerous. There were references to deals and projects, things that didn't sound like business at all. My heart began to race as I turned the pages, feeling the weight of each word. The final entry I read was the one that chilled me the most. Mia had written about a man, someone who had been a constant presence in her life before we met. The man's name was not mentioned directly, but the details were unmistakable. This was the same man I had encountered in the woods. The same man who had made that cryptic comment about burying things. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Mia had a history with him, a history I knew nothing about. I felt a sense of betrayal creeping in, but I couldn't fully understand what was happening. How could Mia have hidden this from me? Had she ever really left that life behind? Or was there something still tying her to it? I was so consumed by this revelation that I didn't even hear Mia coming up behind me until she spoke. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. I quickly closed the journal, but I could tell from the look on her face that she knew exactly what I had been reading. The air between us shifted, and suddenly, everything felt fragile. The life I thought we had built, so perfect, so secure, felt like it was crumbling around me. I couldn't even look at her without feeling the weight of all the secrets she had kept from me. I didn't say anything. I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just walked away, leaving her standing there, the silence between us growing louder with each step. I needed space. I needed to think. But as I walked through the villa, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was no longer alone. It wasn't just the man in the woods. It was Mia herself. She had been hiding something from me for so long, and now I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know the truth, even if it meant shattering everything we had built together. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk alone to clear my mind. But as I left the villa, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. The woods around me seemed darker, more foreboding. The trees whispered in the wind, and I wondered if I was just imagining things. But when I walked into the forest, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, just at the edge of the woods, was Mia. She was walking toward an old cabin, one I had never seen before. And there, standing outside the door, was the man from the woods, the one who had been in the journal, the one who had made those cryptic comments. They exchanged a few words, too quiet for me to hear, but their body language told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just some casual meeting. This was serious. I watched them for a few more minutes, unable to move. Mia had been hiding something from me, something much bigger than I had imagined. When they disappeared into the cabin, I felt a coldness settle over me. This was the moment I had been dreading. Mia's past was something I couldn't escape, and now, I was going to have to face it head on. But what was the truth? What had she been involved in? And why had she never told me? The encounter at the cabin haunted me all night, its grip on me unrelenting. As I lay in bed next to Mia, the soft rise and fall of her chest seemed almost too innocent, too serene, considering everything that was swirling around in my mind. I could hardly sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking into that cabin, her figure fading into the shadows alongside that man, the one who had been a ghost in her past. What had they been talking about? What deal was so important that she had to meet him, secretly, in the woods, far from the villa where we were supposed to be unwinding? The questions were endless, and none of them had answers. Mia had lied to me, but what could I do with that truth? I didn't know. The whole situation was suffocating, and the more I tried to make sense of it, the more tangled everything became. The next morning, I decided to confront Mia. I couldn't keep living in this fog, pretending everything was fine. As we sat down for breakfast, I could feel the tension between us, thick and palpable. She was smiling, asking about the weather, the plans for the day, but I couldn't hear her. All I could hear were the words from the journal, the man's cryptic statement about what people bury, and the image of Mia with that man, walking into that cabin. I wasn't even sure if I could look at her without seeing all the secrets she had been hiding. Finally, unable to stand it any longer, I asked her about the cabin. Mia, I began, my voice low, what's going on? Last night, I saw you walking into the woods. You went to that cabin, didn't you? And he was there, the man I met yesterday. Who is he? What's going on? Her face went pale at the mention of the cabin, her smile faltering as she stared down at her plate. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. I could see her thinking, trying to figure out how to answer without giving away too much. The silence stretched on, and I could feel the weight of the truth hanging in the air between us. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. He's someone from my past, she confessed, her eyes not meeting mine. A business partner. But not just a business partner. He was involved in things before we met, things that I never told you about. I didn't want you to know, Adam. I didn't want you to see me as someone I'm not. But he's not someone I can just walk away from. Our ties run too deep. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could feel my heart race, my pulse quickening as I tried to process what she had just said. She had been hiding this whole other life from me, one filled with dark, unspoken things. Things I never told you about. She had been living a double life, and I had been completely blind to it. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to admit that the woman I had spent the last several years with wasn't who I thought she was. Mia continued, her voice trembling now as she spoke more freely. When we met, I thought I could leave it all behind. I thought I could start over with you, with us. But he's not just a business partner. We were involved in things, Adam. Serious things. And even though I've tried to cut ties, to leave it all behind, he won't let me. He keeps coming back. I thought I could leave it all behind, but I couldn't. Not completely. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she was struggling to keep it together, but it wasn't enough. The world around me felt like it was collapsing. Everything I thought I knew about Mia, everything I thought I knew about our life together, had just been shattered. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out and hold her, to tell her that we could get through this. But the other part of me, the part that had just learned that the woman I loved had kept a massive part of her life hidden from me, couldn't find the strength to forgive her. I didn't know who she was anymore. You were involved in criminal activities? I asked, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. How could you hide that from me, Mia? How could you marry me and not tell me any of this? How could you not trust me enough to share your past? She winced, her eyes brimming with tears, but she didn't answer right away. She was searching for the right words, for something that would make this all make sense. But there were no words that could fix this. There was no easy explanation for why she had kept so much from me. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet and broken. I was trying to protect you. I didn't want you to be a part of that world. I didn't want you to think of me as someone who was capable of that. I wanted to give you a life free from all of that. But now, I see that I was just fooling myself. I never really left it behind. Not completely. And now I'm stuck in the middle of it again. I didn't know what to say. The more she spoke, the more I felt like I was drowning. The truth had come crashing down on me, and now everything felt tainted. My entire life, everything I had worked so hard to build with her, seemed like an illusion. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could do this to me, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, numb, as Mia continued to speak, trying to explain herself, trying to make me understand. I'm so sorry, Adam, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't want this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But it was too late for apologies. I couldn't unsee what I had seen, couldn't unhear what she had said. And no matter how much she tried to explain, no matter how much she begged for my forgiveness, the truth was already out there. And it was a truth I didn't know if I could live with. As I sat there, unable to respond, my mind was already spinning, trying to figure out what to do next. Could I stay with Mia, knowing what I now knew? Could I ever trust her again? Or was this the end of everything we had built? I didn't have the answers. But one thing was clear, my world was no longer the same. And no matter how much I loved her, I couldn't pretend that it was. The rest of the day passed in a haze of shock and confusion. Mia had spent hours trying to explain, her voice cracking with desperation as she begged for my understanding, but it wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. I had spent so many years building a life with her, thinking we shared everything. Our dreams, our goals, our pasts. And now I was realizing that I had known nothing. The truth was like a heavy weight pressing down on me, suffocating me with every breath I took. It didn't matter how many times Mia apologized or tried to convince me that her past was in the past. That past was still there, lingering, and it was part of who she was. It was part of the reason she had become the person I had fallen in love with. But it was also the reason I didn't know who she was anymore. I couldn't erase what she had told me. I couldn't forget the image of her walking into that cabin with that man, the man from her past, the one who seemed to control her even now. I spent the evening in silence, not sure what to say or where to go from here. Mia had pleaded for me to stay, to work through this together, but I couldn't bring myself to make that promise. How could I? How could I continue on with a woman whose past was so entangled with things I could never be a part of? I thought about the life I had wanted, the dreams we had shared, and suddenly it felt like all of it had been built on a lie. And as much as I hated the thought, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't ignore the part of me that knew I would never truly feel safe again. That night, after dinner, I went for another walk. I needed to get away from the villa, from Mia, from the suffocating tension that seemed to fill every room we were in. The air was crisp, the mountain breeze biting at my skin, but it did little to clear my mind. I kept seeing her face, Mia's face, filled with sorrow, her eyes pleading for me to stay. I wanted to stay. I wanted to believe that we could work through this, that love could fix everything. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. There were too many shadows in her past, too many secrets I couldn't ignore. I couldn't live in a world of uncertainty, a world where I was always questioning whether I truly knew the person lying beside me. It was during that walk that I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. From a distance, I spotted Mia again, her silhouette barely visible in the fading light. She was walking through the woods, heading toward the same cabin I had seen her visit earlier that day. My stomach turned as I watched her, unable to tear my eyes away from the image. Was she meeting that man again? Was this the same deal, the same secrecy that had been hanging over us for so long? I didn't know, but I couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut. It was like watching a part of her that I could never touch, a part of her that had always been hidden from me. I moved closer, my feet crunching on the underbrush, but I didn't dare get too close. I didn't want to be seen, but I needed to know the truth. I had to understand what was going on between them. As I neared the cabin, I heard their voices, low and urgent. They were talking about something important, something that sounded more like a negotiation than a conversation. I couldn't make out all the words, but the tone of their voices, the way they interacted, told me everything I needed to know. This was no ordinary business deal. This was something deeper, something far more dangerous. The man spoke to Mia with an ease that made my blood run cold. He wasn't just some partner. He was someone who had a hold on her, someone whose influence stretched far beyond what I could see. And as I stood there in the shadows, listening to their conversation, I realized just how little I really knew about the woman I had married. Mia mentioned something about joint projects again, and my mind immediately went back to the journal I had found. The words she had written, the hints about her involvement in something criminal, something far more dangerous than I had ever realized. I heard her speak with a tone of finality, as if whatever they were discussing was already set in motion, and I could feel my heart sinking in my chest. This wasn't just about her past anymore. This was about her future, and whether I was a part of it or not. I couldn't stay there any longer. My thoughts were spiraling out of control, and the images of Mia, of her with him, were overwhelming me. I turned and walked away, my mind racing with everything I had just heard. The truth was staring me in the face, and I couldn't ignore it. Mia had been living a life I wasn't a part of. And no matter how much I loved her, no matter how much I wanted to believe in us, I couldn't ignore the fact that her world was too far removed from mine. I didn't know how to reconcile that. When I returned to the villa, I didn't even look at Mia. I couldn't. I couldn't look at her without seeing the woman I didn't know, the woman whose secrets were still buried deep inside her. I went straight to the bedroom and packed my things. I needed to leave. I needed to get away from it all. Mia found me in the middle of it, her voice pleading again, asking me to stay, asking me to forgive her. But I couldn't. I had already made up my mind. This wasn't just about her past. It was about everything we had built together. And that foundation was cracked beyond repair. Mia cried, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't pretend that everything would be okay, that this was just a bump in the road. It wasn't. It was a chasm between us that I couldn't cross. I kissed her goodbye, but it was a hollow gesture, one that left a taste of finality in the air. The life I thought we had was gone, and no amount of love could bring it back. As I left the villa that night, I felt like I was walking away from the last part of myself. But I also felt something else, a sense of liberation, of space to breathe, to figure out who I was without her. Mia stayed behind, her world still tangled in the lies and secrets she had kept from me. And me? I didn't know where I was going next. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay. Not with her. Not in that world. It was over. Leaving the villa was like stepping into a new reality, one where I no longer had any illusions about who I was or who Mia was. The mountain air was crisp against my skin as I drove away, but it couldn't clear the fog in my mind. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in that place any longer. The walls of the villa seemed to close in around me as I walked through its empty rooms, the silence of the house echoing my own sense of abandonment. I had spent years of my life with Mia, building a life that I thought was perfect, only to have it crumble in front of me in a single moment. The weight of the deception, of the lies, felt like a crushing burden I couldn't escape. I kept replaying everything in my head, Mia's confessions, her apologies, the image of her walking into that cabin with the man she had once been involved with. I could hear her voice still, begging me to stay, but her words felt like they were coming from someone else, someone I didn't recognize. Mia wasn't just a woman with a past. She was someone I couldn't trust, someone who had kept me in the dark for far too long. As I drove away from the mountains, I felt a sense of relief mixed with a heavy sadness. I had to leave her, even though I still loved her. But the love we shared had been based on a lie, and I couldn't live with that. I couldn't be with someone whose past was a constant shadow hanging over us, a past that I would never truly understand. And no matter how much she begged, no matter how much she tried to convince me that she had changed, I couldn't believe her anymore. The truth had been staring me in the face all along, and now I couldn't unsee it. Mia was a stranger to me, and the life we had built together was just a facade. The days that followed were a blur. I didn't go back to the city right away. I couldn't. I needed to put some distance between myself and everything that had happened. I found a small town, quiet and far removed from the chaos I had just left behind. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a place where I could breathe again, where I could figure out who I was without the constant weight of Mia's secrets. I rented a small apartment, settled into a routine, and tried to find peace in the simplicity of it all. But even in the quiet, I couldn't escape the thoughts of Mia. Her face haunted me, her voice echoed in my mind, and I couldn't stop wondering if I had made the right choice. Maybe I had left too soon. Maybe I hadn't given her enough time to prove that she could change. But then I would remember the lies, the shadow of her past, and I would know that I had made the right decision. I couldn't stay in a life built on lies. I couldn't live with someone who couldn't be honest with me, who couldn't be honest with herself. Mia reached out to me several times in the weeks that followed. She called, left messages, and even sent letters begging me to come back, to give her another chance. She apologized again and again, telling me that she had made mistakes but that she loved me, that she was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. I couldn't bring myself to go back to the life we had. Every time I thought about returning to her, to the villa, to the life we had shared, the weight of her lies pressed down on me again, and I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when the truth had already torn us apart. I couldn't forgive her, not yet, not ever. And even if I did, I didn't think I could ever trust her again. I spent the next few months trying to rebuild my life from the ground up. I threw myself into my work, trying to push aside the memories of Mia, but they were never far away. I thought about her every day, wondered if she was okay, if she had moved on. But I also wondered if she had really changed, or if she was still hiding parts of herself from the world. I didn't know if she had truly let go of her past, and I didn't know if she ever would. The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. The pain of betrayal, the sense of loss, lingered long after I had left. I couldn't erase what had happened, no matter how hard I tried. One night, a few months after I left, I received a letter from Mia. This time, it was different from the others. There was no pleading, no begging for me to return. Instead, she simply wrote, "I've let go of the past, Adam. I'm moving forward. I hope you find what you're looking for." Her words were final, a closing of a chapter that I hadn't expected. It hurt more than I could have imagined, but at the same time, there was a strange sense of relief. Mia had accepted that it was over. She had accepted that we couldn't go back to what we once had. And I knew, as I sat in that small apartment, that I was finally free. Free from the lies, from the uncertainty, from the weight of the past. I didn't know what my future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control again. I wasn't defined by my past with Mia, and I wasn't defined by the life we had built together. I was free to find my own path, to rebuild my life without the shadow of someone else's secrets hanging over me. As I looked out the window of my apartment, the world seemed a little clearer. Mia had made her choice, and I had made mine. We were both moving on in different ways, but moving on all the same. And though I would always carry the memory of what we had, I knew that it was time to let go. Mia's world was no longer mine, and my world was no longer hers. We were both looking for something new, something different. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.